In 1956, the Sinhala was made the sole language of the island, and this meant that government employees had to go through a language proficiency test, and this put thousands of Tamils out of government jobs, and it also put other minorities out of government jobs. Hence, overnight, educated Tamils were made illiterate, and Tamils were disadvantaged in the education and the employment sector. In 1970, something called ethnic standardization came in, and this is a fairly complicated thing, but in a nutshell, it meant Tamils had to get much higher marks to get into university compared to their Sinhalese counterparts. In 1972, the constitution was changed without the Tamils' participation. Sri Lanka was declared a republic and a unitary state, and this meant that constitutional safeguards that protected minorities were removed. Furthermore, Buddhism was declared the state religion, and this automatically made citizens of other faiths outcasts, and it also gave enormous power to the Buddhist clergy. There was a name change from Ceylon to Sri Lanka, and although in the larger scheme of things this might not seem as a big deal, when you identify yourself to a nation, to a country, and you refer to it as Ceylon, something that your ancestors, your grandparents have called it, your parents have called it, to now suddenly have to call it a name that is of a language that is not yours, and although your representatives, your Tamil representatives, opposed this in Parliament to have it passed anyway, that causes a lot of rift in one's, clashes in one's identity and the way one forms their identity and their relationship to a nation. And in 1977, the Prevention of Terrorism Act was brought in, and under this act, Tamil civilians, journalists, politicians, and activists were targeted. And of course, you had regular anti-Tamil pogroms, which were government-backed riots. Now, initially, the Tamils demanded equality. That's all they asked for. Their response to the state discrimination and the state violence was that of non-violence. There were peaceful protests, there were parliamentary democratic means of achieving equal rights, and there was non-violent disobedience by the Tamil people. And to all of these non-violent methods, the Sri Lankan state responded with anti-Tamil violence. Peaceful protests were responded to with violence by the Sri Lankan military. Arrest, torture, and interrogation of Tamil activists and Tamil politicians took place. Colonization and militarization of the Tamil areas of the north and east took place. And furthermore, regular anti-Tamil pogroms took place. And the death toll of these anti-Tamil pogroms increased exponentially as the years went by. In 1956, there was an anti-Tamil pogrom that the government turned a blind eye to, and 150 Tamils were killed. In 1958, 200 were killed. There were riots in 61, 74, 77, 79, 81, and again, each year the number increased exponentially until the Black July riots of 1983, where 4,000 Tamils were killed in a space of a few days. And in 2009, you obviously had 20,000, a minimum of 20,000 Tamil civilians killed. However, this was not because of a riot as such, but because of the military onslaught. This is an image that the BBC uses regularly, and it's an image of what took place in 1983. You have a Tamil youth stripped naked and beaten before being set alight by Sinhala thugs, Sinhala rioters. Now, all of this took place with the Sri Lankan government turning a blind eye. There are reports that the rioters went door knocking and attacking houses, and they knew which houses to attack because they had polling sheets in their hand. They knew which houses belonged, they would look at the names and they knew which houses belonged to Tamil people and which houses did not. And I must add here that a lot of Sinhalese people did save their Tamil neighbors and their Tamil friends, and at the risk of risking their own lives, they did save Tamils. But what needs to be stressed is, although there were a few Sinhalese individuals who risked their own lives to save their Tamil friends, in general, the Sri Lankan government allowed this to happen. And in all cases, you always have individuals who rise above everyone else and who will risk their own lives to save someone else. But what needs to be clarified is the Sri Lankan government was very complicit in this, in the Black July 1983 riots. Now, after 28 years of equality denied, 28 years of repeated changes to the legislation that discriminated against Tamils, and after 28 years of Sri Lankan government-backed violence, the Tamils decided that no longer did they simply want human rights and equal rights, they wanted a separate state. So Tamil political leaders decided that the only means of restoring Tamil sovereignty was through an independent Tamil state in the northeast of Sri Lanka, and they called this Tamileelam. So in 1976, a Tamil political party passed a resolution calling for an independent state. They used this to run for elections, and the next year they won 100 seats in the Tamil areas of the north and east. So this effectively meant that the Tamils of Sri Lanka had voted for an independent state. Politically, democratically, and non-violently had voted for a separate state. This political party also, for the first time, won enough seats to become the main opposition party. Since then, no Tamil political party has won enough seats to become the main opposition party, and partly the reason for this is, could be the Sri Lankan, the Sinhala colonization of the East, because Tamil votes got diluted. However, in 1983, the democratically elected parliamentarians were sacked by the then president. Now, whilst this was taking place, simultaneously an armed resistance began. So whilst the Tamil politicians and Tamil political leaders attempted to ask for an independent state democratically, Tamil youth responded to 28 years of failed political demands by starting an armed resistance. And in 1976, the Liberation Tigers of Tamileelam, or the Tamil Tigers, LTTE, is formed as an armed resistance group to fight for an independent homeland. So only after 28 years of peaceful resistance did the LTT come into being. This is a very important point. And the struggle for independence basically started off through political means, but was forced into military means because of continuing violence and also continuing lack of recognition of legitimate Tamil grievances by the Sri Lankan government. And the reality of the fact is that majority of Tamils rallied behind the Tamil Tigers. And the reason for this was, for example, in 1983, you had 4,000 Tamils killed within a matter of 4 to 5 days. So there was a lot of frustration. A lot of young people decided to go and join the armed resistance because they lost faith in the political democratic means of achieving an independent homeland. There was also the democratically elected parliamentarians being sacked and the parliament being dissolved in 1983. And also the ethnic standardization meant that a lot of young people who spent their lifetime studying very hard to get into university were told that they couldn't get in simply because they didn't get 99 or 98 or whatever the cutoff was, whereas their Sinhala friends were able to get in with much lower marks. So this frustration led a lot of Tamil youth to go and join the armed resistance. And the reality of the fact is that is why the Tamil Tigers had a lot of support from the Tamil people. And so since the armed resistance began, of course, there's been the Sri Lankan war, the Sri Lankan ethnic conflict, and according to data collected by Tamils, up to 130,000 Tamils may have died since 1976. Between 1977 and 2002, the LTTE became a major military force and gained control of significant areas of the northeast and managed to establish civil administration services in these areas. What I must point out here is the Tamil Tigers have also been accused of human rights abuses. They have been also accused of targeting civilian targets. Now, whilst that takes place, they have been judged. The international community has judged the Tamil Tigers, and they have been analyzed, and human rights organizations have talked about the Tamil Tigers, etc. Today, in my speech, I would like to point out that as much scrutiny, as much criticism is not taking place of the Sri Lankan government, a government whose attacks on civilian targets, whose attacks on churches, orphanages, hospitals is multiple times worse than what the Tamil Tigers were ever capable of or ever had conducted. And this accusation, this finger-pointing, has not been done in equal proportion by the international community. In 2002, a ceasefire was signed by the Tamil Tigers and the Sri Lankan government. It was monitored by the Scandinavian countries and was facilitated by the Norwegian government. So the Tamils wanted a separate state. In 1976, the Tamil political party won all seats, and in 2004, after the ceasefire was signed, a Tamil political party asking for a separate state won 22 out of 23 seats in the north and east of Sri Lanka. What this shows